like to start out by saying that this event today has been made possible by the financial support of the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs and takes place as a larger project on linking good governance of the security sector to SDG16 through key oversight bodies such as civil society, ombuds institutions, and parliaments, which is whom we'll be discussing today. So SDG16 sets out a vision of peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. In doing so, it underscores the nexus between security and development and the importance of the age-old axiom that there can be no peace without development and no development without peace. Contained within SDG16 are objectives that seek to reduce violence, promote rule of law, reduce illicit arms flows, combat organized crime, and reduce corruption. All of these objectives have quite profound implications for a country's security sector. Parliaments are indeed a critical component of the security sector. Parliaments regularly make laws that create the rule of law, combat violence and organized crime and corruption, and regulate arms flows. Parliaments allocate funding to these security providers and can use this tool to effect change. But Parliament's role does not end here. It's critical that they continue overseeing these tasks, even as the laws are passed and budgets allocated. Also importantly, SDG16 strives to create effective, accountable, and transparent institutions. These good governance principles ensure that laws function as they are designed and that the security sector remains beholden to the population it is responsible to protect. Parliaments can encourage security providers to be more effective and accountable and transparent by using other tools at their disposal, such as, but not limited to, through regular defense or law enforcement committee hearings, by holding official inquiries or investigations, or by initiating audits, just to name a few. This objective of achieving accountability is relevant to each and every objective contained within SDG16, and it is critical that parliaments actively use their powers to ensure this, as it will strengthen or buttress all other efforts. Today, however, we find ourselves in new territory. Extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures, and COVID-19 has posed new challenges to all aspects of society. The security sector is no exception. Security actors have been tasked with performing a variety of roles outside their usual scope of duties, ranging from enforcing quarantine measures and facilitating contact tracing, to disinfecting streets and distributing masks to the population, to providing medical care and support to the general public as well. They have been invested with vast new emergency responsibilities, and effective oversight of this massive societal undertaking is more essential now than ever. Meanwhile, amid this response to combating COVID-19, parliaments have seen their capacity of action reduced. Legislatures across the world have been navigating new measures to uphold safety regulations inside parliaments, which have included, amongst others, working remotely, voting electronically, and holding fewer sittings of committees. In addition, with so many new initiatives and emerging predicaments, parliamentarians have found themselves overstretched and understaffed. While this all may sound troubling, it can also be seen as an incredible opportunity. In the response to truly global crises, like COVID-19 is, we find ourselves at a moment where massive amounts of change and reform is possible. Decisions taken in response to COVID-19 will shape our future for a long time to come. It is my hope that in the decisions that we take in responding to COVID-19, that we can reiterate and firmly embed in these new laws, practices, and policies the importance of effective oversight and accountability. That all laws passed will have strong accountability components, and that Parliament will reassert or double down on its oversight role. I am very much looking forward to learning from our 4 distinguished panelists today about how they are working to achieve SDG16 and create peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, and how that may or may not have been affected by COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Will. That was very useful, particularly that you have emphasized that the security sector actors have received bigger and greater powers, more capacities to deal with this crisis, while at the same time parliaments have been in a sort of slowdown due to reduction of sessions, etc. And it would be very interesting to hear from the parliamentarians who have joined us at this panel how this has worked out in their parliament in their country. So I will be introducing our panelists in a second, but before I would like to briefly present the format of this webinar. So instead of having long presentations, we will have Q&As between me as the moderator and the 4 parliamentarians, and that will be in a few rounds, 3 rounds. And in this Q&A, they will share with us their examples, their practices, as they have used them for reaching SDG16, but in particular amidst the current COVID-19 crisis. So afterwards we will have a Q&A session, and you will be able to to put forward your questions in the Q&A future, and we will be very interested to hear from you, from the audience, how this has played out in your countries. And as much as possible, we will ask the parliamentarians to reply to your questions. So before that, I turn now to the first speaker, and I'm honored and pleased to introduce to you Senator Rodrigo Lara Restrepo, Senator Lara of Colombia. He is a lawyer and holds degrees from the universities in Colombia and France, as well as from Colombia's Superior War College. Noteworthy, Rodrigo Lara was appointed anti-corruption czar in 2006 before he became senator for the first time in 2007. He was also a member of the House of Representatives. He was even the Speaker of the House, and he is also the president of his own party, the Cambio Radical, from 2015 to 2017. He's a member of the first committee of the Senate of Colombia, which deals with constitutional reforms, criminal law, legislative branch rights, guarantees of citizens' duties, peace-seeking policies, and ethnic issues. So, Senator Lara, I would like to ask you, can you maybe share as a starter in a few minutes, can you share with us 1 or 2 specific examples how your work in the Senate has contributed to SDG16 in Colombia? Senator, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon for you all. I'm very glad to be here at the Stockholm Forum amidst this COVID-19 crisis. And as you said, indeed, I'm a member of the first committee, first constitutional committee. We have 7 constitutional committees, and we are in charge of constitutional reform, rights, guarantees, and duties, legislative branch, peace-seeking policies, and ethnic issues, among others. Another talking about 2 specific examples of how my work contributes to SDG 16, I would talk about, first of all, a project, an initiative I presented last year in order to solve the issue of conflicts of interest involving the Attorney General. Last year, our Attorney General was recused because he had worked for a firm on the investigation for the Odebrecht scandals. And we found that we didn't have an adequate way to nominate ad hoc attorneys for such eventualities. So we put forth a piece of legislation to solve this institutional problem. And on the other hand, I'm working strongly on the rule of law and access to justice. In my country, judicial backlog and prison overcrowding are 2 of the main obstacles to effective access to justice. Thus, one of my main struggles has been opposing penal or punitive populism, which not only makes any judicial and criminal law system unsustainable, but tends to target different sectors of society in different ways.
Very much. I believe now the camera is back to me. So thank you very much for this first answers, and I see that you have put a lot of emphasis on making sure that abuse of position and corruption is minimalized as much as possible, rule of law, access, the dealing with the overcrowding of prisons, and also particularly impunity. These are all very important issues in the SDG 16 targets indeed. Thank you so much, Senator. So now it's my great honor to introduce to you the Honorable Dawda Jawara of Gambia, also known as Sana Jawara. He attended St. Augustine's High School in Banjul, and afterwards he moved to the UK, where he settled with his family before moving back home and to start a company, an ice production company. Sana Jawara became a National Assembly member and parliamentarian in April 2017, where he served on the 4 committees, including the Committee on Defense and Security. I would like to ask you, Sana Jawara, can you please share with us a few examples how you, as Member of Parliament in Gambia, have contributed to the SDGs targets? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hans. I am honored to be here. To go straight into your question, I think the first would be, the attainment of SDG16 6, which is to develop an effective and accountable and also a transparent institutions. So my take is this, because when we first came into Parliament and I was nominated as a member or selected as a member of the Standing Committee on Defense and Security, the first thing we noticed was that for the past 22 years before our legislature, this particular committee was dormant. There was no meetings held, there was no institutional memory, and basically there was no oversight functions conducted by this particular committee. So we had to start everything from so like I said, with no institutional memory, we had to actually improvise to see what kind of work plan to develop. And with the support of DCAF, we were able to quickly, and we were in fact the first committee to actually develop a strategic plan which covers our tenure, the whole 5 years. And because of that, we were able to identify the relevant stakeholders and call them before us to familiarize, but also to actually assert our mandate and authority, to make sure that they know who we are and what we stand for, and what our mandate is and what powers we have. So this institution includes the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Interior, the Chief of Defense Staff, the Inspector General of Police, the Director of Immigration, the whole 9 yards, all the way to the prison services. And we were able to do this very effectively to make sure that we also can actually have a very good working relationships. Given the history of our country, that before that there was nothing that was actually conducted in such a manner. So that was our I would say our first specific example to our work that contributes to the SDG 16. The second one will be basically is our day-to-day, like personally, my day-to-day contributions to critical issues when it comes to debates in passing laws, our oversight functions, our interactions with these security players. Because dictatorship. And because of that, so we have to work very hard to instill in these security sector actors the sense of civic authority, because many of them, because of the military rule they came from, that led to civilian rule, they didn't have any understanding of civilian authority. So to assert that, it means it's a very sensitive path that you have to work with and allow them to come on board, without raising much of an issue. So I think I will give these two examples for now. And thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Dawda Jawara, for these examples from Gambia. And I think what is very powerful, what you said, that actually democratic accountability has actually two sides of the coin. At the one hand, is to set up and to restore and reinvigorate the parliament after return to democracy. And so many things had to be put in place, as you have eloquently set out. And on the other side, it's not only the one who exercise control, but also the ones who are subjected to oversight and control, in this case, the security sector, to imbue them with a sort of sense of rule of law and respect for civil authority. That was extremely useful to hear that. Thank you so much. Then I would now like to turn to Georgia and to Member of Parliament Sophie Kiladze. Sophie Kiladze is a Member of Parliament since 2016. and she holds the position of chairperson of the Committee on Human Rights and Civil Integration. She started her career in Georgia as a lecturer at the Master's Law program at Tbilisi State University, while also giving lectures at Grigol Robotnice University. In 2012, Sophie Kiladze became the head of the International Legal Cooperation Division of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. And in 2014, she was appointed as Deputy Rector of the Police Academy. Since 2016, after graduating from the Ruprecht Karls University in Heidelberg in Germany, she continued to be affiliated with the Max Planck Institute for Comparative Public Law and International Law. Sophie, I also would like to ask you whether you can give maybe one or two examples how you in Georgia have tried to contribute to SDG16, peaceful, just and inclusive society. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's an honor for me to speak on this very important panel. We all face very problematic time now because of COVID-19, and the role of Parliament is extremely important now. But in general, SDGs, SDG16 in particular, is also an SDG which ensures the strong institutions, and in this regard, Georgian Parliament has done many reforms. Of course, I'm focused in the Parliament since 2016 on human rights in particular, and I can very shortly speak about two reforms, both of which I'm personally. It's about vulnerable groups and protection of vulnerable groups, of course. It's a reform of social workers. We have created a new law on social work, which protects, of course, the beneficiaries of social workers, and which protects as well the social workers themselves. And another very good example of the role of Parliament, which is very important in the building of strong institutions, is the Child Code. Child Code is very much appreciated by the UNICEF, by the European Union, the United States of America, and other partners of Georgia, which creates a strong basis, legal basis for child protection system and child rights protection system in our country. Also, very important is that we have strengthened, due to these both reforms, the municipalities, the self-government, which is a core issue in democratic societies, as you are well aware, because previously we had some weak self-governments, but nowadays, because of these two reforms we have regarding vulnerable group protection, regarding the child rights protection, very strong institutions, and I'm also personally coordinating the implementation of both reforms in the framework of oversight of parliamentary functioning. So for the 1st September of 2020, we will have these both reforms fully implemented. Of course, we will take care of further overseeing of these both reforms. So we in the Parliament, and in particular Human Rights Committee, we have created law, and of course we will bring it to the end. I mean, we will continue to oversight the implementation process, and if there are some problems in the implementation problems, we will of course use our parliamentary mechanisms in order to to improve those problems. So this is very shortly about the two major reforms, fundamental reforms, where I have participated personally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie Kiladze, for these instructive examples, and particularly with your examples, with your work as chairperson of the Human Rights Committee, you actually have alluded us to the wider issue of human security and not in the narrow sense of state security, which I think is very important when talking about SDG16, such as local governance, minors, etc. So that was absolutely very valuable. Thank you so much. So last but not least, I'm very pleased and honored to introduce to all of you Member of Parliament, Dr. Bhatt of Nepal. He is a member of the Federal Parliament of Nepal and a member of its International Relations Committee. Recently, he has contributed to the drafting of Nepal's national security policy, which is now in force, as well as he was a member of the high-level task force of Nepal on reorientating Nepal's foreign policy in 2017. Dr. Bhatt is also the founding director of the Nepal Center for Security Governance since May 2016, and he has done a lot of security-related research and policy work since 2005. He holds a PhD in International Relations from the Southeast Asian Studies Division of Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. So, Dr. Bhatt, I would like now also to ask you to give us a few examples from how Parliament in Nepal has contributed to achieving and implementing SDG 16. The floor is yours, Dr. Bhatt.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, organizers, DCAF and Stockholm Forum, for providing me this opportunity. I'm honored to be here, and I have been hearing all the panelists before, so many things, many experiences I've heard, which are very interesting. In fact, in Nepal, we have entered into the era of republic and the federalism. So the federalization process in Nepal is very new, which started with this parliament. I mean, the elected parliament in 2017 only. So we have 2 years, tenure to implement this federal democratic republic in a new way. And in this, we have been working on the responsive and inclusive and participatory constitution should be implemented, which is a big challenge. In that sense, we have been working to draft new or some to revise new bills to introduce federal police or the central police to the provincial polices. One very important work we have done in that sense, and which will help to make an inclusive and participatory police, not only the police, but the other institutions also. And with that, at the federal level and the provincial level, we have been closely working in that direction and building capacity of the civil society and back and forth in my constituency and in the capital, Kathmandu. I have been working with many stakeholders and parliamentarians in International Relations Committee and the Affairs Committee, which is directly looking after the security forces to make them inclusive and make them the new arrangements in the federal setup. So now we are a bit comfortable, but still the process is going on one hand. On the other hand, we are happy that we have introduced some reservation and quotas for the marginalized communities. As you know, the Hindu caste system has marginalized some sections of society, so they are on board through these inclusive processes. So implementing new constitution and federalizing the all setup is big challenge for us. So we have been working on these two fronts.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Bhatt. I think that you have very much to the point, very well set out the working on civil society, which is crucial, as we all know that parliaments don't do the work in splendid isolation, but they're connected and are depending on inputs from civil society. And I think what was also very pointed that you mentioned that working on inclusivity of the security forces, because we can only expect that the security sector will provide security for all if they themselves are also inclusive. That would be the best guarantee for security for all and leaving no one behind. Thank you very much for this. So this was the first round of questions. We will now turn to the second round of questions. I also would like to point out to our participants, the attendees, that you can fill out questions at any time that you would like to do it in the Q&A feature below in the screen, and we will then attribute the questions to the panelists. So having said that, I come now to the second question, whereas the first question was more about implementing SDG 16 as such. We now turn to this pandemic that all has hurt us and has asked for a lot of sacrifices in so many countries. So as Will already mentioned in the beginning of his presentation, that the overseers, and particularly Parliament, who holds the security sector accountable, are themselves also hard hit by the pandemic in figuring out how to adjust to the new situation. And we would like now to know from our friends from Colombia, Gambia, Georgia, and Nepal, how they have managed this. So my first question is then to Senator Lara. How has your parliament and the committee in which you are a member of, how did you manage to oversee the government's response to COVID-19? The floor is yours, Senator Lara.
Okay, well, the second constitutional committee is in charge of the oversight of security issues. And during this crisis, it has summoned the Minister of Justice for overcrowded prisons. They have also summoned the Minister of Foreign Relations to address the issues of repatriation of Colombians abroad and the transit for Venezuelan refugees from Ecuador and Peru towards back to Venezuela. They have also summoned the Minister of Defense to address the several issues, including violence in southern Colombia. But I believe that the scope of this constitutional committee is pretty wide. And what I mean is that they are in charge of the oversight of the police and the armed forces, but also the issues related to international affairs, from the diplomatic career to foreign trade. So I believe that the committee lacks the necessary specialization to achieve a proper oversight of any of the issues. So that means a feeble political control that we conduct on those issues. And it has become even weaker now, given the virtuality or the remoteness of the session, both committees and the plenary. We have a particular issue in Colombia is that we have now 100% remote parliament, remote Congress, or virtual Congress. And as you know, when you spread the members of Congress all over the country, well, we lose the aptitude to make political control. The strength lies surely in the gathering, in the physical gathering of members of parliament. But on the other hand, I think that the weakness of the political control over the security areas is also related because we lack of the due competences to make inquiries and audits from this second constitutional committee. And that means that we can't call, we haven't developed, or we haven't the competence to call hearings under oath for civil servants. So, I mean, we can summon the civil servant, we can summon the police, we can summon the ministers. This is more in an informative fashion, an informative way, than into a compulsory way. So that's, I think, that makes that political control quite toothless. And the lack of abilities to conduct hearings is also impaired, given that we don't have a special venue. That means that we lack maybe the support of a specialized office, specialized in these issues. So it's more formal than real, the control that we have over those issues.
Thank you very much, Senator Lara. And I found it particularly interesting that in the case of Colombia, that you see that the COVID-19 crisis has actually magnified the weaknesses already there in the structure and the functioning of the parliament. It made it more visible. And in particular, you said the committee dealing with the oversight of the security sector has such a broad mandate with many more things than only security sector, that it is not anymore a sharp instrument. And the second thing which I found extremely interesting, as everyone knows, the political culture is so important for effective oversight, a culture which is conducive to have critical oversight. And then what is political culture if we are not together, if we are all remote and we are not. So this is something we should explore further, and you have provided here an extremely interesting entry point. Thank you so much for that. So then I go now to the Honorable Jawara from Gambia, and I would like to know from you how in your parliament has contributed, how the Parliament's Security and Defence Committee has dealt with the government's response to COVID-19. The floor is yours, Mr. Jawara.
Thank you very much, Hans. Just like my friend Senator Rodrigo Lara from Colombia said, the oversight on government's response to COVID-19 was not per se, the mandate of the Standing Committee on Defense and Security alone in the Gambia. Because it's a cross-cutting issue, it has issues to do with health, it has issues to do with security, finance, local governance, public enterprises, it has issues to do with trade, it has issues to do with tourism. So basically in the Gambia, what we did was, first, when the threat of COVID-19 was looming towards West Africa and then towards Gambia, the state found the need to declare a state of public emergency. Now, when this state of public emergency was declared, after 7 days, as mandatory by law, that we have to actually extend it. It's only the National Assembly which can extend the state of public emergency now for another 4 days. So we extended it for 45 days. But what the National Assembly of the Gambia did was, they instituted, a new special select committee, which is taking into consideration all the different sectors I mentioned earlier, to come together, and they were mandated to monitor the implementation of the regulations that were raised by the government towards the state of public emergency. So I was honorably, humbly selected as the vice chairman of that committee. And, like I said, the committee, had, the whole span of the 45 days to monitor what, the government is doing.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether Jawara is ready with his contribution or that it was frozen. But let us proceed, and he can come in later on. I just want to emphasize what I thought was extremely interesting to hear from him, that he really emphasized the most important function of Parliament in this pandemic is to support and to endorse or to declare the state of emergency and also to end it. Furthermore, he also pointed out, as we see in another account, as what Will also mentioned in the beginning of this panel, that some parliaments are really reduced in their powers. So in Gambia, they have actually taken a more assertive approach by setting up a new special committee to deal with all COVID-19 aspects across the board. I think that was an extremely interesting thing to hear. So then I turn to Sophie Kiladze of Georgia. Can you please maybe say about your parliament, or how your parliament has dealt with the oversight of the government's response to COVID-19? The floor is yours, Sophie. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Georgian parliament remained very active also towards the COVID-19 period. The problem was, of course, what is the case in all parliaments, I think, of the world, that we could not gather ourselves so often because of COVID-19, because of threats which are really very seriously to be taken into consideration. But we didn't stop to oversight in different ways the security sector as well, of course. For example, personally, me as the chairperson of Human Rights Committee, I was several times in prison because, as you are aware, there was the threat really of spreading in closed buildings this COVID-19, And I was also in the Ministry of Defense, where the armed forces are there. I mean, also police officers, to see how they, in which conditions they are, how they feel of the situation, whether their rights are protected or not. And we have two special reports. We will have discussions on them. This is State Security Agency, and this is State Inspector Service. State Inspector Service deals with the oversight, which is independent and deal with the oversight of security sector, amongst others. And it is very important to have real good parliamentary oversight, how they did their job during pandemic period. We will stay very active in this regard. Of course, as a conclusion, I can say that the pandemic period has I mean, made many obstacles in order to had made many obstacles regarding the oversight over security sector as usual, but I think we have very strong mechanisms in our hands as the Parliament, as the Human Rights Committee, and in the next week the Prime Minister comes to Parliament, and amongst others, of course, we will ask questions about the functioning of security sector. But as far as I have mentioned, the State Security Agency's report, which is already in Parliament, also State Inspectors report, they will be very strong mechanisms in our hand in order to see really how the security sector did their job. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophie, for bringing this to our attention, particularly that you actually say that the regular oversight mechanism, including those these special state inspectors, that you use these bodies also to input in your work, and that the current that accountability of the state security sector is ongoing in this respect. Thank you very much for this. Then we go to Dr. Bhatt of Nepal. Can you please maybe share with us how in Nepal the Parliament has tried and has succeeded, what extent it has succeeded in overseeing the government's response to COVID-19? Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. In Nepal, our federal parliament is under the annual budget session, and House has been reopened 2 weeks ago. And before that, the committee were working related to their own focused or the responsible works, and especially the International Relations Committee and the State Affairs Committee, which are more responsible for dealing with such pandemic situation. We started coordinating with other committees, and we summoned Minister for Foreign Affairs, Minister for Home Affairs, and Minister for Defense, Deputy Prime Minister, and the Minister for Defense. And before that, government has created a central monitoring and coordination committee to look after all this pandemic to respond to COVID-19. And we discussed in our committee how the migrant workers, which are in million, which are working in the Arab world, working in the Malaysia, and especially in the India, where we shared the open and the porous border. So millions are working as a migrant workers, how to make them return safe, and how to erect the quarantines, and how the tests related to the COVID-19 should be conducted in the borders, and which can become a mess, because the transmission can be spreaded over the groups of the society. So for that reason, the committee has been working coordinated with other committees. And now, and at the same time, Armed Police Force, which is given a responsibility to the border security, has erected its 500, plus 400, 100 plus where they're already border outposts, but 400 temporary outposts have been erected in the borders to look after or give surveillance to the movement of the migrant workers, especially in the 3 sites where we are sharing border with India, and that is big task, and which is have been set up now. And at the same time, the impact in society is seen a big. For that reason, all the related Ministry of Health and Population and Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Home Affairs, which is looking after the National Police and the Armed Police Forces, is coordinating with, and they are in the forefront to deal with the society in terms of giving not only security but health services, and of course they also are facing challenges in this this time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bhatt. This was extremely useful and very insightful. I'm really grateful for you for that. As I see, we're running a little bit out of time, and may I ask also the panelists also to received a lot of questions, and some of the questions are specifically addressed to some of the panelists, and the panelists can answer these questions in the Q&A directly, so we can then save time while these questions you can answer to you individually already. So please go ahead with that. But now I come to the third and the last round of questions. I would like to ask the parliamentarians, how does COVID-19 impact on your work in overseeing security providers and contributing to SDG16? So, Senator Lara, can I ask you to briefly go over this question? Thank you.
Well, as I said briefly in the last answer of the second question, I mean, the feeble political control we conduct in Colombia now has become even weaker given the virtuality or the remoteness of the session of both House committees and the plenty of restrictions imposed by the response to COVID-19. This is something that affects not only the oversight of the statutory security sector, but all political control. This is a major concern because with a Congress that works only in appearance, what we have is a, well, sort of very strong executive branch. So authoritarianism is hence the greatest threat here. And I believe that our responsibility as representatives of our fellow citizens is to ensure that we don't devolve in terms of what has been achieved, in terms of political rights, in terms of social development goals. So we have a formal Congress now that works 100% remote, 100% virtual. But as I said, also, when you disunite, when you have disjointed members or spread members of parliament all over the country in their own houses, talking through a platform, well, we disunited, we lack political strength, and then we lose the aptitude to make political control. There is no real political control now. It's mere formal political control. And as long as we don't gather again, we don't have physical presential sessions, it is very difficult to talk about political control.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Lara. I would like now to go to Mr. Jawara. How does COVID-19 impact on your own work in overseeing the security sector in their work to contribute to SDG16 in Gambia? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, for the simple fact that we are having this virtual interview here today, is a clear indication of the impact of COVID-19, not only locally, but also to our work and towards our contribution to SDG16. But to zero in and to your question on a national front, I think the negative effect that it has on our oversight on the national security providers is that it's not really possible to do certain oversight functions, especially when it comes to issues of close interactions, things that should be of like a physical nature. to go into certain confinements of environments. It makes it very difficult. Even like the previous question you asked me, during the nationwide tour that we are doing to go and see firsthand the implementation of the regulations of the state of public emergency. It was very difficult for the National Assembly, in terms of logistics, because the vehicles can only carry so much, because we have to reduce the capacity to have. We have to be very careful when we go to crowded places like markets, like fish handling sites, fish landing sites, like the ferry crossing terminals, like the border towns, to see ourselves firsthand, what we're talking about when it comes to the WHO recommended social distances and stuff like that. So it makes our job almost practically impossible. And it also lead to the National Assembly coming to the conclusion that since non-essential issues are factored, it's better to actually hold on to not having non-essential meetings. So we actually basically would only sit where and if necessary that we have to talk about essential issues. But all other legislations like that can wait. We'll have to suspend them for now. So basically, this is basically how much is impacted our work locally and internationally, and it's something that we just hope that it is finished as soon as possible, so that we can all start working on our set agendas, and the reasons why we came into office in the first place. Thank you very much.
Thank you for these insights. Without further ado, I go now to Sophie from Kiladze from Georgia. Can you maybe very briefly detail how COVID-19 has impacted on your work as parliamentarian in dealing with these issues?
Yes, thank you. I can say that COVID-19 made our job as parliamentarians and the functioning of committee almost impossible regarding the oversight of security sector, because we use very much the online means. For example, the complaints from different citizens who apply to the committee or to me personally, they applied via online, via Facebook or via email or other online means. So we can have reaction on the complaints of concrete persons, concrete citizens. Now, me personally and my colleagues from our committee would visit different agencies. It is possible for us. Of course, we use appropriate clothing, but in general, it is possible, and we do this. The only problematic issue which faces our democracy now, that we cannot gather together, also together with opposition, because one of the strongest parliamentary mechanisms is, of course, debates in the parliament, that the opposition is making concrete arguments or concrete informations, etc. It is, of course, impossible for us, but since tomorrow we will have no emergency situation anymore, and we will begin our normal parliamentary sessions, also committee hearings as usual. So we are beginning now, Georgian Parliament, since Monday, the normal work, so to say.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that that the situation is so progressing so well in Georgia, and that you go back to sort of kind of normal situation as of next week. Dr. Bhatt, may I ask you, as last but not least, to ask you how this crisis has affected you, your work as a parliamentarian to address these issues? Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. In fact, in Nepal, the lockdown had been imposed in the third week of March. Since then, the things are not very worsened at the beginning, but now it seems becoming more and more critical. Though the parliaments, both the houses of the federal parliament and the provincial assemblies are called up, they are under the sessions are going on, and the physical and the social distance have been maintained in the parliament, in the committees meetings, or all these things are operating, but things can become more worse in the days to come. That is because of as I mentioned earlier, because of the open border and the thousands and the millions people are migrating in that border. That's one case, the special case in Nepalese context. But we have been regarding the SDG16 and the challenges posed by the COVID-19 here. All the security forces, they're working in an umbrella, as I mentioned earlier, the Central Monitoring Coordination Committee, led by the Deputy Prime Minister and the Defense Minister, and all responsible ministers are there, and the committees are time and again interacting with this coordinating committee, and asking questions and summoning, as I mentioned earlier, the ministers, and if needed, Prime Minister's office and the Minister of Councils also giving suggestions and directions to the government time and again. But on the other hand, as I said, our federal system is in the preliminary stage to work in a setup. So local and provincial and the federal governments are working well to respond the challenges and the challenges posed by COVID-19. And the best thing is like security sector governance and the processes are working there. So we are very closely looking on these issues, and of course the challenges and the problems posed to the security forces are quite bigger, and will have a bigger implications in the days to come.
Very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Bhatt. Thank you for this contribution. So I would like now to turn briefly to some of the questions that have been raised that we can see as panelists. And I would like to actually to ask the panelists that we do actually two things at the same time. I will give you a few topics about which people have asked questions. And if you could merge that with your key takeaway of this panel, that we do these two things in one go, instead of separately answering the questions and then the key takeaway. So we have now sort of go now one last time back to you for the key takeaway, and I give you also a few of the questions that were raised, and you can choose which of the questions which are relevant for your situation. So you had one question on inclusivity. How can you assure that the security sector is inclusive? Another question was about this COVID-19 response is very attractive to some more authoritarian leaders to securitize the response. What is the best antidote to counter that? And what's the securitization of the response in your country? And then another question was about, do you have actually access to all information that you need? And the last one on the role of media. How could they play a constructive role here? So these are some of the themes that were asked. You don't need to answer them all. You can just pick one and combine that with your key takeaway. And you have for this 2 minutes each. Thank you. So Senator Lara, I'm very sorry, you're again the first one. Can I ask you to pick out one of these themes and to combine that with your key takeaway of this panel? Thank you so much.
Certainly, yes. Do we get all the information we need to make a proper political oversight? Well, in my country, partially, because as I said first, in the first question, you can summon the ministers to the second constitutional committee or to any constitutional committee. You can only summon them. We don't have proper inquiry powers. You cannot, we lack also the means of proper hearings with oath, so that makes that I mean they attend the summon that we make to our constitutional committees, but they don't feel necessarily compelled to say all they have to say, because we don't have the audit powers, the inquiry powers, and we also lack of a specialized office to guarantee that they will tell us the truth. And the information that they provide to us is sufficiently sharp and exact. And on the other hand, you were talking about the media. So we also have a problem now facing the COVID-19 crisis, because I mean, the Colombian media are suffering the same problems of formal media all over the world. I mean, the decrease in advertisement has made that they are suffering financial problems. So you have, and you can see that there is the strong advertising coming from public funds, from the government, also from some specific areas of the economy, like banking or financial sectors. So, and sometimes the interest of the financial sector and the government sector can coincide, particularly in terms of a weak parliament.
Okay, thank you. So the CP organizer just informed us that we have to stop actually in 4 minutes. So can I ask the other three panelists to be as brief as possible? Otherwise, it will be quite challenging. Thank you. So the floor is to Mr. Jawara.
Thank you very much, Hans. Basically, just quickly, two questions now that I want to pick on. Somebody did direct a question about small arms convention that the government of the Gambia notified the ECOWAS commission. This is news to me, to be honest. If it's the case, then maybe because of this COVID issue, might be the reason why such information has not reached us. But however, I understand there is an institution called the Parliamentarians for Global Action, who has been knocking on the doors of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, to make sure that we submit our instruments to the UN systems when it comes to BWC convention, that's the biological weapons convention, but also small arms trade within West Africa. The second issue I want to just actually hit on quickly is about there was also a question about reforms, or the necessary reforms that this COVID-19 might have indicated to us. And I think in the Gambia's context is just two that I want to mention. That's Public Finance Act, to make sure that the environments issues are not abused, and also public procurements, because here we are talking about an emergency situation, but our act for public procurement does not contain any provisions to allow for certain speedy procurement process to be taken care of. So I'll leave it for now.
Thank you. Well, and there's one line, Sophie Kiladze from Georgia. Can you say what is your key takeaway? I think because now we are getting really running against the clock. Thank you.
Yes, I will try to be very, very quick. It's I think all parliaments are affected, and for all parliaments, it's really very, very difficult to oversight the security sector as usual. So maybe for the future, we should think about it. So for those situations which was maybe unbelievable for some months ago, we should do our best in order to have some plan in the case such situations occur, and till the pandemic is to the end, we should have some concrete maybe plan how to increase the functioning of parliament, in particular also on oversight sector. And about media, just very quickly, media is very important, and it played a huge role in the case of Georgia. Media is free and they were everywhere, and there was no restriction for media, and they played a huge role in order to have such results for Georgia. So very low number of infected persons as we had in Georgia.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Dr. Bhatt, over to you. You in one line, your key takeaway.
Yeah, in terms of media and social media and individuals, getting information and sharing information is quite free here. It's constitutionally guaranteed. And in terms of inclusivity, we have made quotas or the reservation for the women and marginalized communities and the sections of society, and which has been it's constitutional and mandatory. So we see that in public service commission and in all setup in the security forces or in the every setup of the local, provincial, and the has secured that. So we are moving towards that. So hopefully we will be in good position regarding this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we had a very, very rich discussion and exchange of thoughts. There are more questions to be answered, but we will include this in our report because we have the questions here. We will see how we can address them, but we will surely do that. So I would like to thank Senator Lara of Colombia, Member of Parliament Jawara of Gambia, Member of Parliament Sophie Kiladze of Georgia, Member of Parliament Dr. Bhatt of Nepal for their willingness and the time to be here with us. I also would like to thank the audience to attend this event and to raise the questions to us. Last but not least, I would like to thank CIPRI for giving us the opportunity to host this panel at the Stockholm Forum on Peace and Development. And last but is also the Netherlands Minister of Foreign Affairs for supporting this event. Then my colleagues from Latin America and Caribbean, they mentioned to me that in Colombia they will organize an event on monitoring the security sector, maybe online, perhaps later in June. You will hear all about that later. So in this context, I also would like to thank my colleagues of Latin American and Caribbean division, the Asia Pacific division of DCAF, and the Sub-Saharan Africa division of DCAF for helping us to make this together. And of course also Will and Alexandra for all the support in making this happen. Having said this, I wish you all a pleasant evening, morning, afternoon, and I thank you so much for all your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hans.
Bye.
Thank you, Hans.
All the best.
Thank
you. Bye.
Alexandra.